As long as you keep secrets and suppress information, you are fundamentally at war with yourself. Hiding your core feelings takes an enormous amount of energy. It saps your motivation to pursue worthwhile goals, and it leaves you feeling bored and shut down. Megumi Fushiguro is one of the most misunderstood characters in Jujutsu Kaisen. He is often dismissed as a character whose potential was wasted by Akutami, leaving some viewers disappointed by his seemingly lackluster ending. But I beg to differ. While I believe that the origin of most people's bad takes is a combination of surface-level reading and not understanding basic narrative techniques, JJK is also not the most accessible story to read, so I get why some people struggle to read it. In this video, I want to do something similar to what I did in part 1 with Yuji. I want to go over all the philosophical and psychological concepts surrounding Fushiguro and explore how Gege delves into themes of identity, inherited trauma, moral responsibility, and the rich symbolism woven into his character. Are you ready? Let's begin. The first and most important thing I covered is the map of the soul, a visual representation of your mind. According to Jung, the persona represents the I you wish to be, the version of yourself you show the world. The shadow is the I you wish not to be, all the parts of yourself you suppress or deny. Lastly, the ego, meaning I in Latin, acts as the mediator, balancing the persona and shadow to shape your sense of self. The biggest mistake I've seen people make is separating the curse from the vessel. This undermines the series' message and explains why many see the ending as random when, thematically, it makes perfect sense. There is a reason why we get to see Yuji and Yuji Kuna as two separate characters, but not with Megumi. And that is because, unlike Yuji, Megumi doesn't see himself as a hero, so there wouldn't be that separation between who he is and who is not. This version of Sukuna personifies Yuji's negative traits and repressed memories. For Megakuna, we can say that the core archetype is the shadow. The surface emotion is how self-sacrificial he can be and the associated experience behind it. It is the abandonment by his dad, a key trigger that's brought up multiple times in the story. It's such a pivotal issue that it even led Toji to be written back to life so he could confront it head-on, to emphasize the idea that no matter how many times you tell yourself it doesn't matter, your trauma always finds a way to manifest. I also mentioned how Yuji Kuna and Megakuna have completely different dynamics, which all comes down to what fuels them. For Yuji, it's about doing something only he can do, almost like fulfilling a duty. But Megumi's drive is fueled by something darker, suppressed resentment, something I like to call the curse of the Zenins. But before we talk about the Zenins, what's the conversation around Megumi? There are two key points. Let's use the transplant problem to set it up. Imagine a surgeon has 5 patients needing organ transplants to survive, but no organs are available. A healthy traveller, whose organs match all 5 patients, comes in for a routine checkup. The doctor secretly kills the traveller. The question then isn't whether this is morally justifiable, but what would make it defensible for the surgeon to take the life of one person to save 5 others? This is the question asked of Megumi time and time again. First by Gojo, then by Yuji at the detention center, and repeatedly throughout the story. The answer to this question is actually quite simple. It will be different depending on your experiences and values. If you or a loved one needed a transplant, or if the right amount of money was offered, you might find yourself making the same difficult decision. For Megumi, giving up on Yuji simply because he's cursed would mean abandoning his sister. That is only the first part of the question, though. The second part is, if you're able to forgive others, why is it so hard to forgive yourself? Thematically speaking, Megumi's role is to prepare to be saved, which ties back to what Gojo did at the end of Hidden Inventory. Yuji's role is to be his hero, not by grand gestures, but by understanding Megumi's darkness through his own struggles with self-acceptance and forgiveness. In the real world, a good example would be how those who have struggled with addiction in the past are often more effective at helping others facing the same issue. Their experience allows them to empathize and guide without judgment, offering hope and understanding that only someone who's been there can provide. However, for the help to work, Megumi must also play his part. He must believe in his ability to change, recognize his worth, and most importantly, genuinely desire that change. Finally, Megumi embodies the destructive impact of suppressed trauma and generational pain. His journey illustrates how toxic family dynamics ripple across generations and contaminate those involved. The question introduced, how do you break the cycle? In The Traumas of Displacement and Not Belonging, Susan Schwartz writes, those deprived of inclusion, recognition, and/or respect are condemned to harbour feelings of invalidation of their personhood in virtual aloneness. Rejection, especially from family, creates estrangement, not only from others, but also from one's self. This estrangement fosters frustration and feelings of inadequacy, disrupting self-worth and leaving deep emotional scars. Even after leaving the Zenin clan, its toxic legacy ripples outward, tragically shaping the lives of its members. Maki vows to become the head of the clan, but loses her sister in the process. Toji becomes the sorcerer killer only to lose his life when he's about to reach his goal. A decision that changes Megumi's life forever. The same paper says, traumatic blanks and distortions in the individual are passed from generation to generation. In an unending spiral, the emotional and physical losses combined with the need for belonging can feel so intolerable that we try to deny it, while the pain paradoxically takes us to the core of who we are. From the very first moment we are introduced to him, we can see how angry and cocky he is, very Zenin of him. The best example is in the elementary school flashback where Megumi beats up a group of bullies, calling them out for basically asserting dominance. Sumiki reprimands him because she sees right through his actions. She's not upset about the fight itself, but because she doesn't want him to take his anger out on others. We prefer to take our anger out on people where it is justifiable. Otherwise, you would be the mean one. While Sumiki's advice to be kind is well-intentioned, it has a fundamental flaw. It doesn't address the root of Megumi's anger. Telling him to be nice doesn't make the internal rage disappear. Instead, it forces him to suppress it. So, when did Fushiguro begin to confront this suppression? The shift in his mindset can be traced back to chapters 57 to 58. Initially, he treats the curse as a whack-a-mole game, a perfect metaphor for his habit of suppressing emotions rather than addressing them, but when the true curse emerges, it mirrors the earlier detention center incident where Yuji allowed Sukuna to take control. This moment forces Megumi to reflect on Gojo's question. Does his desire to train stem from fear of Yuji surpassing him? Gojo's advice to be greedier wasn't just about ambition, it was about freeing himself from the constraints he had imposed for Sumiki's sake. This is why we see her flashback occurring simultaneously as his internal battle, where Megumi unleashes the incomplete Chimera Shadow Garden. It signifies the release of his bottled emotions and the awakening of his hunger to grow stronger. This context also reframes his later conversation with Nobara, which reflects a shift within Fushiguro. Another visual cue is when Megumi grabs the finger, his pose mirroring Toji's stance against Gojo. The tragedy is that Toji had the miracle of a lifetime, the ultimate trump card, to break the cycle and live for something greater than validation from the chains of the Zenins, but he chose pride. Let's shift to special great curse spirits, because I briefly covered an exciting pattern, but it is worth mentioning again. Mahito in the earlier chapters explains that cursed spirits are born from negative human emotions. Among them, Jogo represents the earth, Dagon the sea, and Hanami the forest. Volcanoes, the sea, and forests are different ways to symbolize the unconscious in psychoanalysis. Yuji's confrontation with Jogo symbolizes repressed emotions and primal forces erupting when left unchecked. Gojo's battle against the forest represents a journey of self-exploration, confronting the unknown happening at the underground train station. Meanwhile, the sea is tied to Megumi's connection with the unconscious. Fun fact, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean lies one of the world's largest volcanoes, half, often overlooked despite their massive eruptions that go unnoticed because it is under the sea. So, going to the Dagon domain expansion, being at the beach, and Toji coming out of the water is the type of storytelling I live for. Notice that everyone in this domain is Zenins except for Nanami. Toji fighting Dagon on behalf of Megumi basically means that before you worry about your natural unconscious, you need to deal with your trauma. Then, after getting out and pushing him to his limits, Haruta, whose power is miracle, coincidence I am sure, who has also been pushed to his limit by Nanami, pokes until he completely breaks, unleashing Maharaga, who symbolizes repressed resentment. So if we combine the whack-a-mole game, Haruta's power of miracle and Maharaga's adaptation skill, we can precisely pinpoint Megumi's issue, pushing down his feelings and escaping from them, pretending like nothing happened. And this is the battle of the shadow for both Yuji and Megumi. You can think of it as the moment both are at their lowest, and they are just looking for a way to make themselves feel better after losing their fights. Quick side note, I want to direct your attention to chapter 1, where two little frogs are at the back of Megumi's leg. Frogs, kairu in Japanese culture, signify return, a fitting metaphor for suppressed trauma resurfacing as Monster used it. The frog at the top is a representation of Maharaga, and the one at the bottom has Sukuna's markings. We also get to see them used again in the battle with Gojo, where he said that Maharaga's regeneration is intrinsically linked to Megumi's soul. Moving on to the next major event in the series, when Sukuna takes the finger out of Yuji's body and force-feeds it to Fushiguro, it's a fascinating representation of projection, where individuals unconsciously transfer their repressed fears, insecurities, and darker traits onto others. This also introduces introjection, a psychological defense mechanism where individuals unconsciously adopt the thoughts, attitudes, or behaviors of others. In this case, you could say that Yuji, as a defense mechanism, believes Megumi shares his ideals, which are then internalized. Instead, he pushes him deeper into despair by destroying what remains of his moral compass, killing Tsumiki. With nothing left to ground him, the new target becomes Gojo, and Megumi also wins that fight. At this point, he becomes the king of curses, the strongest sorcerer, and technically the head of the Zenin clan, fulfilling the family's dream. Ironically, with Maki cutting ties, the Zenins can't reap the rewards of the position they caused so much suffering to achieve. It makes me wonder if Gege's message is about cutting off toxic families when they refuse to change. That's my best guess. Every fight becomes a battle of ideals, questioning what it truly means to be the strongest, and how to guide someone who doesn't know how to care for those beneath them. The solution would come from Yuji, acknowledging his projection and asking Sukuna to leave Megumi alone, taking responsibility for those feelings himself. By carrying that weight and using it as feedback to work on himself, Yuji demonstrates a mature and honestly quite realistic way of growing up. Also let Megumi know he will be okay and missed if he doesn't return. Sometimes knowing someone believes in you and cares can help you get back up and reach out. The story finds a middle ground, showing that there is life and redemption even after royally screwing up. My favourite thing about the finale is that it doesn't fundamentally change who Megumi is, but allows him to grow while remaining true to himself. His moral compass becomes internalized, and his decision to assist the angel reflects his commitment to helping those weaker than he is, something he wouldn't have previously done. Megumi doesn't suddenly become extroverted or wildly optimistic. He's still the introvert we've always known, but now with a more profound sense of purpose and clarity. The last piece of the puzzle, and in conclusion, the story's moral, is that you need to allow yourself to grieve. Not just about death, but about dreams that are no longer possible, about the unfair past, trauma, mistakes, and misunderstandings. Take time to grieve, process, and then adapt. Whether you're a hikikomori, a bully, or someone who has been bullied, move forward, begin again, and try to help at least one person if possible. Become someone's hero. Anyways, please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed this video. Thank you for your time. Have a great day.